Welcome to Theater Advice with OnStage blog, where we answer all of your questions regarding theater. My name is Greg. I'm part of the editorial staff of OnStage blog and onstageblog.com. Joining me today, the founder of OnStage blog and a man with more than 25 years experience in all things theater, Chris Peterson. Chris, welcome. How are you?
Thank you very much for having me. Very excited to be here. This is
Of course.
honestly the highlight of my week nowadays. So I'm rip roaring ready to go.
Well, I'm glad you're here. Otherwise, it'd just be me talking to myself about answering theater-related questions. So glad you're here to save the day for our audience.
Which is fine too.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks to the audience for joining us. This is our YouTube channel, Theater Advice, where we answer reader emails as well as Reddit questions regarding theater. If you have a question related to theater you'd like to have us answer on the channel, you can email us theateradviceosb@gmail.com. That's theateradviceosb@gmail.com. All right, today's question is from Reddit. It is about auditioning for a role, but whether they should step aside for a friend for the role. All right, again, this is Reddit user Lavinia's tongue twist. Lavinia's tongue twist. All right, we're gonna flash the question on screen. I moved to a small town years ago and have been very involved in the theater scene, mostly as a director. I'm planning on auditioning for a role and was told by the director years ago when he started scheming to get this produced that while he'd never precast, he's been wanting to see me play this role and has had a hard time seeing anyone else in it. He's not the only person who has approached me about playing this role since I've been here. I'm a good fit. But I've also learned that a friend that I love and admire is going through a really hard time and has set all her hopes on this role. She wants it so much more than I do. This happened to me once as a director and it infuriated me. After auditions, the woman I wanted refused the role because her friend wanted it more. So while my first inclination was to say that I wouldn't audition, I'm really starting to doubt myself. This woman is older than I and doesn't plan to leave the area, so this is a last chance for her, but not for me. All right, Chris, a lot to unpack there. Let's boil it down to just this fundamental question. You and a friend are auditioning for a play. She really wants it, a specific role. You'd be fine with it. The director thinks you'd be better. Well, hasn't made a formal decision, but you think you'd be better. Do you step aside for your friend, assuming, let's just say, to make this really simple, or you strongly suspect it's either you or this other person for the role? What would you do? What would you advise this person?
Oh, all right. Well, let me put it this way. If it's a professional audition, friendships aside, we're both auditioning. That's it. It's a gig. It pays. Got to pay the bills. Hope you get it. Hope I get it. Great. At a community theater level, changes the entire complexity. Let me put it this way. If this person's dream role, and if I got the role, I'd be like, okay, yeah, great. I'm the lead. This is great. I'm really happy. I would probably step aside, honestly, because it's like one of those things where it's like, if I'm that good that I know I'm going to get cast in certain roles going forward and things like that, maybe I do give it up and don't put myself up for a certain role. And very rarely, I'll be honest with you, with some of these musicals, there might be that one role, but also there's so many other roles that you could play in some of these large ensemble pieces that you get just as much fulfillment out of, both artistically and entertainment wise. So yeah, I would probably step aside in that situation. Also, it really depends on the show too, where it's like, look, if I know that I am not the right person for this role and this other person is, and we both very talented and would get cast, then yeah, I would definitely step aside from my friend who is much, much better for this role, especially if that role is calling for a certain type of racial background or a certain type of situational background and things like that as well.
I want to get to that, but I want to save that for later. I want to say, let's assume same ethnicity, same race, same gender. Yeah. So this is the first episode, I think, where I've challenged your advice. So pardon the following challenge, but isn't it the director's job to decide who's really the right person for the role?
Yes. Short answer, yes.
So
but one can make here again, there's so much context that goes into this thing. honestly,
Of course.
no offense to Lavinia Spoonfed, whatever her name is. I'll just say
Lavinia Tongue Twist, I think, is the right
Lavinia Tongue
person.
Twist.
Yeah.
No offense to this person, but they sound very confident. They sound like, look, if I audition, I know I'm gonna get this part. Like it's one of those like she must be either that talented or that full of herself to think that she's gonna get cast every single time. So in that situation where and let's call it, be honest, in certain communities, there are people that will get the lead every single time they audition. I've seen it happen many, many times. So this person probably could say, look, I'll take myself out of the running and to give my friend a better shot at getting this role. Because if I audition for this role, she ain't getting it. But
so yeah, so you're saying like in that situation where it's like, the director basically cast their favorites, even if they may not be the best person for the role.
mm-hmm.
So if like you really know that you're the best arbiter of who'd be best for the role, then it'd be appropriate to step aside. Is that
Exactly.
what you're saying?
And
Yeah.
I would never take it as far as getting offered the role and declining it to give it to someone else. Like, don't do that because then you're just wasting people's time. Take yourself out of the running to begin with. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess the only thing I would throw in there is I would be careful making casting decisions, not just in place of the actor, but also because remember, you're doing this play for the audience, and you don't want the audience to not just suffer, but you want to give the best play. You want to give the best performance for the audience. And I say you as the cast. So I would be very hesitant to say, well, I might be better for the role, but this person wants it more, so they should get it if they're not going to be as good for the role as you are, even if it doesn't matter to you whether you play the role or not. Because remember what you're doing this for. Theater isn't about you fundamentally. It's about the audience who are paying money in most cases to see the show. So I think Chris, I think we've made like a narrow case. I think where it would be appropriate to step aside again if like the director's pre-casting or they generally cast the people they know, and you're equally as fit to play the role, as someone else. But I think in those situations, I don't think they should step aside. If you are genuinely better for it, you should get the role because that's what the audience wants to see. That's sort of where I'm coming down. Now, I do want to get to, you touched on race, gender, those sorts of things. We generally talk about this a lot in the blog, but we talked about it with Funny Girl in the last couple of weeks, where the audition encouraged Jewish performers to audition, and it was your take, which I generally agree with, that people should let non-Jewish performers should let Jewish performers have the first crack at the role, that they should not just audition for it and try and get it if there are equally capable Jewish performers. Do you want to expand upon that, whether it's to this specific story or generally other, race and ethnicity examples?
Yeah, I mean, just really simply, I put out a tweet that just basically said, look, if a show is calling for Jewish performers to portray a truly authentic Jewish character, and if you're an actor that's not Jewish, you shouldn't audition for that role. You should have the self-control, the conscious, the empathy to know that that is not a room that you should be in. I mean, there's nothing more awkward than, if you're playing Fanny Bryce or if you're playing Tevye in Fiddler and you have to ask someone how to pronounce certain words in Hebrew or Yiddish, or you have to ask about how a Jewish person would act in this situation. Now, there are some roles that are Jewish characters that don't come with that level of authenticity or that need of knowledge and experience. And in some cases that might be okay, where you might not have a Jewish person play that role. But there are some roles out there that absolutely you need to have someone who lives that experience, that knows the culture, things like that. Obviously, when it comes to racial things, if a show is calling for a Hispanic Latino person, and you might be a white person that passes as Latino, you still should not go into that room. That happens a lot with shows like In the Heights, where it's like, you are a Caucasian. Why are you showing up for this audition? Because you're taking away an opportunity
Right.
from someone who deserves to be there.
So, this topic generates a lot of conversation, some of it not helpful, that we see on our social media, but we can have a good conversation around it and hopefully we can agree to disagree. But that's our general advice to that situation, as well as this other person. Again, the Reddit question was about their friend, and so again, I think so to really answer the question, we had to need a little bit more details, but hopefully we gave you some good general guidelines that you could figure out what's the best thing to do in your situation. So, all right, Chris, that wraps up this episode. So once again, if you have a question you'd like us to answer, theateradviceosb@gmail.com. You can also check out onstageblog.com and our newsletter, which has columns, 8 years worth of columns and editorials that answer all sorts of theater questions. And then lastly, of course, you can follow us for updates on new episodes at OnStage Blog for Facebook, Twitter, Threads, and Instagram. And also, please, if you like this content, hit subscribe, hit follow, share it with your friends. We appreciate all the views and all the follows that we get. All right, that wraps up this episode, Chris. And to everyone watching us, we'll see you next time.